Every Thursday, the Madres del Plaza de Mayo, a group of women, mothers, now grandmothers, and other supporters, gather with white kerchiefs around their heads, photos of disappeared loved ones, and a simple chant: "We want our children, and we want them to tell us where they are." In 1976, the army took over the government of Argentina and launched a devastating campaign that killed, disappeared, and tortured hundreds, if not thousands, of mostly left-leaning people suspected of supporting the Perón government. Young people in particular were kidnapped in the middle of the night, with no publicly accountable justice system to trace their whereabouts or offer justice. The women met one another while sitting quietly, fearfully, in visits to police stations and military barracks, trying to find out something in their search for missing relatives. Most of the women were housewives, few worked outside the home. And slowly, the mothers discovered that they were not alone. They began to tell each other their stories. Most had young adult sons and daughters who had been swiftly and suddenly pulled from their homes, work, or classes, and few had been seen again. The authorities, often laughing and calling them mothers of terrorists, lied to them, offering false and often offensive explanation for their children's disappearances. And then courageously, the mothers began to demonstrate. Every Thursday, in silent marches in the large Plaza de Mayo in Buenos Aires, the site of Argentina's government. They were the first to publicly challenge Argentina's brutal military dictatorship and its dirty war. To identify each other, the women began wearing a white headscarf. They said that it represented both a diaper and also symbolized the white dove of peace, which can unite all women. Some carried pictures of their missing children. No matter what our children think, they should not be tortured. They should have charges brought before them. We should be able to see them and visit them. The simple repetition of the truth and the expression of their sorrow as mothers came at a time when most Argentinians either ignored the brutality of the regime or were afraid to speak out. The women's pleas for help fell on the deaf ears of the church, most labor union leaders, the business community, and the press. They were criticized. They were called las locas, the crazy women. Neighbors and friends avoided them. Many had family members who worried for their safety and urged them not to get involved. But one woman responded, "What can be worse than their taking my child?" The women's defiance of the military put their own lives at risk. Leading members of the original group were disappeared, but others kept returning to the plaza, often having to try and outwit the police who came to break up their demonstrations. They met in different places on different days, learned to deal with attack dogs and tear gas. If one person got arrested, they all went to the station as a group. In the plaza, we felt strong, they later said. We decided to return to the plaza as it gave us a good feeling. The plaza made us feel close to our children. Luke's gospel recounts a story today, told by Jesus as a parable that we often refer to as the widow and the judge, or the persistent widow and the unjust judge. We don't know what the circumstances are for which the widow is demanding justice. And there's even a question as to whether she's demanding justice or vengeance, as both are implied in the Hebrew. But Luke's perspective on the judge is crystal clear. He is not one who feared God or respected the people. And so Luke is implying that he is not at all fit to be a judge. After all, the law of God has two central tenets: to love and honor God, and to love one's neighbor. What kind of judge does neither? So in this reading, the heroine is obvious. The widow who is so persistent that she squeezes justice out of the most miserly of judges. She drags the law to bend to her will through sheer determination. Widows of that time were understood to be largely powerless, the most vulnerable of the vulnerable, and nevertheless, she persisted. In Argentina, the Madres have continued their weekly protests for over 4 decades now. They have gained the admiration of world leaders in human rights, politics, and even the media. Exploiting the image of elderly women as powerless, the Madres have transformed themselves from an informal group of mainly housewives into an internationally known organization. And yet, despite their efforts and their victory over public opinion, most of them have never found satisfying answers. Most of the people responsible for the murders and abductions of their children have never been tried, or were tried and convicted and then later pardoned by other right-wing regimes in Argentina. But Luke's parable is not only about politically vulnerable women and corrupt judges or judicial systems. Supposedly, Luke writes, it is about God and us. God is not like this judge. God does not make you beg for justice or wait for salvation. And yet here we are, 2,000 years after this story, and we are still waiting. What do we make of a promise of God that feels like it has been broken? How do we construct a faith that seems to ask us to ignore all the evidence? If God is a just judge, how can there be so much injustice? What if God isn't unlike the unjust judge, not because God is a more just judge, but because God is more like the persistent widow? What if God has been begging us, God's people, to follow the covenant we had with God? What if God is showing up every Thursday with a white bandana and asking us to join her in the plaza? Because certainly God has mourned the unjust deaths and losses of God's own child and of many of God's beloved children. Certainly God has been present around kitchen tables and community centers and church fellowship halls when people have gathered with nothing but their grief and their determination. Certainly God has been present in the public square when mothers from Buenos Aires to Mexico City to Ferguson and beyond have cried out for justice. Luke asks us, will there be faith on earth when the Son of Man comes? It's easy to lose faith when we ask God why tragedy befalls us, when injustice is on the front page every morning and suffering surrounds us. It is easy to lose faith when we expect God to deliver and save us without our participation. It's impossible to imagine a way for God to end a war or stop climate change or cure cancer if we go on with business as usual and throw in a prayer at the end of the day, and understand God's actions to be completely separate from our own. God's promise is not for cheap grace or instant salvation. God's promise is Christ's presence with us in the change-making, in the community building and cancer research and hand-holding and casserole delivering. God's law is not God's to uphold, but ours. God's justice system has no white-haired judge in a black robe sorting humanity into good and bad, but rather a covenant that is both a promise and an invitation. That invitation is for us to meditate on God's law day in and day out, to walk with God's law year after year in order to co-create the kingdom that God desires. The cover art on your bulletin this morning is a Polish wood carving of the 10 Commandments. And I honestly don't know anything more about it than that. but it struck me as beautiful. And it brought to life the words of the psalmist that we heard, "Oh, how I love your law. It is my meditation all day long." Words that on the page struck me as strange and unrelatable, but seeing this art that brought those words to life made a little bit more sense. Imagining the artist slowly and quietly chiseling the law out of a solid piece of wood, bringing life and color to ancient words seems to me a meditation on the law. And what would it look like for us to pray in an embodied way on the greatest commandment? To write in beautiful calligraphy, or make up a dance, or sing a new song to yourself, or chant, "You shall love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself," day in and day out, for at least as long as the woodcarver spent carving and painting that piece. How might the meaning of that promise and that law seep into us in a new way when we really spend time with it? Might it take God's law from being some ancient words on a page, a promise unfulfilled, and turn it into a lived reality in our lives? And isn't that what prayer is for? There's the old joke, of course, that I'm sure you have all heard before, about a man who was on the porch of his house as floodwaters rose around him. And he prays to God that God would save him from drowning in this flood. And just then, a man comes by in a rowboat. The man invites him to get in, and he will save him. But the man on the porch says, "No thanks. I'm waiting for God to rescue me." The water kept rising, and the man had to go to the second floor of his house. As he looked out the window, he saw a man in a motorboat come by. The man in the boat invited him to get in because he had come to rescue him. The man in the house again replies, "No, thank you. I'm waiting for God to rescue me." And the waters kept on rising. Soon the man was forced to climb up on the roof. A helicopter came by, and the helicopter lowered a rope and shouted down for the stranded man to climb up to be rescued. And still, the man wouldn't get in. He just said again, "No, thank you. I'm waiting for God to rescue me." Well, eventually the floodwaters rose above the house rooftop and the man drowned. When he got to heaven, he asked God why he didn't rescue him from drowning when he had perfect faith. God replied, "What more do you want from me? I sent you 2 boats and a helicopter." What would it take to believe not that God will save us, but that God has given us everything we need to save ourselves? That in the gifts of sacred community, the abundance of creation, and the guides of ancient law and scripture, we are equipped to imagine and co-create God's kingdom here on earth. What if we really believed not in God out there, but God right here and everywhere? God showed up today, here, in hospital rooms and refugee camps and war zones. The question is, where will we show up tomorrow? Amen.